The Calico Ghost Town campground had always been a place of fascination for my wife, Karen, and me. Its old, abandoned buildings and tales of the past stirred our curiosity, and we thought it would be the perfect spot for an RV camping adventure. However, our visit turned into a chilling experience that would forever remain etched in our memories. As we arrived at the campground, the sun hung low in the sky, casting an eerie orange glow over the rusting remnants of the once thriving town. We parked our RV surrounded by the skeletal structures of buildings from a bygone era. The silence was oppressive, and the desolation of the ghost town felt like a heavy weight upon us. We set up our camp chairs and gathered around a small campfire, our excitement mingling with the apprehension that the deserted town exuded. The stories of Calico's ghostly inhabitants were well known, and we couldn't help but share some of the eerie tales as the sun dipped below the horizon. The night was clear and starry, the chill in the air only adding to the eerie atmosphere. The campfire crackled, casting long, dancing shadows on the ground. Karen and I laughed at our own fears, taking solace in the warmth of the fire. But as the night deepened and we retired to our RV, the ghostly legends began to take on a life of their own. The silence of the ghost town seemed to press in on us, and an unsettling unease crept into the air. In the middle of the night, I awoke to a sound that sent a shiver down my spine. It was a faint, ethereal whisper, a voice that seemed to float through the RV's walls. I nudged Karen, and she stirred, her eyes filled with confusion as she registered the eerie presence. The whispering continued, growing louder and more insistent. It was a language we couldn't understand, the words indistinct, like the mutterings of a restless spirit. The air in the RV turned cold, and we could see our breath as it mingled with the haunting whispers. We tried to dismiss it as our imagination, but the whispers persisted, surrounding us with a sense of dread. It was as if the ghostly inhabitants of Calico had awakened and were attempting to communicate with us. The stories we had shared earlier in the evening now took on a more sinister significance. The RV seemed to shudder as the whispers continued, the words becoming clearer but still impossible to decipher. We clung to each other, trembling with fear, as the presence in the RV grew more insistent. Suddenly, the RV seemed to twist and contort, as if the walls were warping before our eyes. The room closed in around us, and I could feel a suffocating weight pressing down upon us. We reached out to touch the walls, but they were cold and unyielding, like touching the surface of a tomb. The whispers were no longer coming from outside the RV. They were all around us, their voices now a chorus of ghostly chants. We tried to escape, but the confines of the RV seemed to shift, trapping us in a nightmarish space. The whispers reached a crescendo, and the air grew heavy with an oppressive presence. We could see the ghostly figures of Calico, their spectral forms moving around us, their eyes filled with a yearning that sent shivers down our spines. The RV twisted and writhed, the walls warping and shifting. We were enveloped in darkness, the ghostly figures pressing in on us from all sides. It was a nightmarish realm, a place of torment and anguish. As the first light of dawn broke, we were thrust back into our own reality. Our RV returned to its normal state. The ghostly figures and the haunting whispers were gone, leaving us disoriented and shaken. We fled from the RV, our hearts pounding, and as we drove away from the Calico Ghost Town campground, the memories of that night continued to haunt us. The camping trip had taken a terrifying turn, an encounter with something beyond our understanding, and a night that would forever remain shrouded in mystery. Calico had become a place of unanswered questions and unexplained phenomena, and the tranquility we had sought had been replaced by a terror that would forever linger in our memories. The ghost town had revealed its secrets, and they were far more chilling than anything we had ever imagined. On one crisp October weekend, my friends and I decided to embrace the call of the wilderness and embark on a camping trip. The plan was simple: a small group, a remote campsite, and a weekend of nature and camaraderie. Little did we know that our adventure in the woods would take a nightmarish turn. We set out early on a Friday morning, eager to leave the city behind. The drive took us deep into the heart of the forest, far from the noise and bustle of urban life. The campsite we had chosen was secluded, a hidden gem we had stumbled upon during previous hikes. It was nestled by a serene lake, surrounded by tall pines and the soothing sounds of nature. Our group consisted of 5 friends, including myself, Sarah, Tom, Jessica, and Mike. We had grown up together and our bonds ran deep. Our camping trips were a way to reconnect and escape the daily grind, but this time, our adventure would test the limits of our friendship. As we set up our tents and gathered firewood, the afternoon sun cast a golden hue over the forest and the tranquil lake glistened in the distance. Our laughter filled the air as we settled around the campfire, sharing stories and toasting marshmallows. It was the perfect start to a weekend of adventure. As night fell, the forest took on a different character. The rustling leaves and chirping crickets were comforting, a symphony of nature's nocturnal creatures. But beneath the soothing sounds, a subtle unease began to creep in. It started with the sensation of being watched. I noticed my friends glancing into the shadows, their smiles fading. The forest seemed to close in around us, the towering trees becoming oppressive. We dismissed our unease as a product of our vivid imaginations and the unfamiliarity of the wilderness. But as the night deepened, our unease grew into something more profound. A strange stillness settled over the campsite, and the forest seemed to hold its breath. The laughter and conversation ceased, replaced by a heavy silence. I suggested telling ghost stories to lighten the mood, but as we began to speak of haunted forests and lost souls, a shiver ran down my spine. It was as if the forest itself was listening, absorbing our words, and weaving them into its own sinister narrative. Jessica, always the adventurous one, suggested we take a moonlit hike to the lake. We grabbed our flashlights and set out, the woods alive with shadows and whispers. The path to the lake was overgrown, and the branches reached out like skeletal fingers, scraping against our skin. As we approached the lake, the moon cast an eerie glow on the water, and the rippling surface reflected the night sky. It was a moment of tranquility, a brief respite from the growing unease. But our peace was shattered when we heard the sound of footsteps in the darkness. We froze, our flashlights cutting through the shadows. The footsteps grew closer, their rhythm deliberate and methodical. My heart pounded, and I could see the fear mirrored in my friend's eyes. A figure emerged from the trees, bathed in the ghostly light of the moon. It was a tall, gaunt man, his clothes tattered and dirty. His eyes were vacant, and his expression devoid of emotion. He walked past us, as if we were invisible, and continued down the path. We watched in stunned silence as the man disappeared into the darkness. A feeling of dread washed over us, and Jessica whispered that we should return to the campsite. We made our way back, our flashlights trembling in our hands. When we reached the campsite, the fire had burned low, projecting long, flickering shadows. The oppressive stillness had deepened, and the forest seemed to hold its breath. We huddled together, our hearts racing, and the unease we had felt earlier now turned into sheer terror. The sound of footsteps returned, growing louder and more frenetic. We scanned the darkness, our flashlights revealing nothing but the looming trees. The footsteps seemed to surround us, as if a multitude of unseen figures closed in. In a blind panic, we grabbed our gear and fled into the night, leaving the campsite behind. The forest was a maze of shadows, and the footsteps pursued us relentlessly. The air was thick with fear, and we stumbled through the darkness, branches scratching at our skin. Finally, we burst into a small clearing, our flashlights revealing a sinister sight. The tall, gaunt man we had seen earlier stood before us, his vacant eyes fixed on our trembling group. We were trapped, the forest closing in around us, and the man's presence was a nightmare come to life. As the man approached, his lips twisted into a grotesque smile. He raised a bony hand, and a chorus of whispering voices filled the air, a cacophony of eerie laughter. We were paralyzed with fear, unable to move or speak. Suddenly the man let out a blood-curdling scream, a sound that sent shockwaves of terror through us. The scream echoed through the forest, and the oppressive silence shattered. It was as if the forest itself had awoken, and a multitude of voices joined the man's cry. We panicked and turned and ran, our hearts pounding, and the footsteps pursued us. We didn't stop until we reached the safety of our car, where we sped away from the cursed forest. We returned to the city, our friendship forever scarred by the horrors we had experienced. The camping trip had taken a nightmarish turn, an encounter with a malevolent presence that defied all reason and logic. The forest had held its secrets close, and we had unwittingly stumbled upon a terror beyond imagination. The memory of that night haunted our dreams, a reminder of the darkness that lurked in the heart of the wilderness and the evil that could consume even the closest of friends. When it comes to family camping trips, we've had our fair share of adventures. Some were filled with laughter, s'mores, and campfire songs, while others were marred by rain, lost gear, and bug bites. But none of those experiences could have prepared us for the camping trip that would leave us terrified, shaken to our core, and questioning the boundaries of reality. My wife Sarah and I and our 2 kids, Amy and Mark, had been planning this particular camping trip for months. We'd picked a secluded spot deep in the woods, miles away from the nearest civilization. It was our attempt to escape the hustle and bustle of city life, to unplug and connect with nature. As we arrived at our chosen campsite, nestled beneath the towering pines, we marveled at the natural splendor around us. The air was thick with the scent of earth and pine, and the forest seemed to beckon us with open arms. We set up our camp, the children helping eagerly, their excitement palpable. The day passed in a blur of exploration and adventure. We hiked along the forest trails, crossed crystal-clear streams, and reveled in the serenity of our surroundings. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, we returned to our campsite, the children giddy with stories of their discoveries. The evening was cool and clear, the sky adorned with a tapestry of stars. We gathered around the campfire, roasting marshmallows and sharing stories. The night was alive with the chorus of nocturnal creatures, their calls harmonizing with the crackling of the fire. However, as the fire dwindled and the forest fell into silence, an eerie sensation settled upon us. It was as if we were being watched, our every movement scrutinized by unseen eyes. I dismissed it as mere imagination, but the unease in the air lingered. As we retired to our tent, I couldn't shake the feeling of being observed. The children fell asleep quickly, their soft breathing a comforting lullaby. Sarah and I lay there, the darkness outside pressing in on us. In the middle of the night, I awoke to the sound of a soft, distant chant. It was a haunting melody, the words indecipherable. I nudged Sarah, but she remained asleep, her face peaceful. The chant continued, growing louder and more insistent. I crawled out of the tent, desperate to discover the source of the eerie sound. The forest was cloaked in darkness, and the chanting seemed to surround me, coming from all directions. I followed the sound through the trees, its ethereal quality sending shivers down my spine. As I moved deeper into the forest, the trees twisted and contorted, their branches forming grotesque shapes. The moonlight cast eerie shadows on the ground, and I couldn't help but feel that I was being drawn into a realm of the supernatural. The chanting grew louder, and I could see a faint, flickering light in the distance. I moved towards it, my heart pounding in my chest. The light seemed to emanate from a clearing in the forest, and as I stepped into it, the sight before me froze me in my tracks. There, in the center of the clearing, stood a figure unlike anything I had ever seen. It was a tall, grotesque creature, its body contorted and misshapen. Its skin appeared to be made of bark, and its eyes were hollow sockets that glowed with an eerie, unnatural light. The creature chanted in a language I couldn't understand, its voice sending chills down my spine. It raised its skeletal arms, and I could see long, gnarled fingers that reached out towards me. I couldn't move, paralyzed with fear. In that moment, the creature's eyes met mine, and I felt a sensation of dread like I had never experienced before. It was as if it could see into the very depths of my soul, and its gaze filled me with a terror I could not comprehend. As the creature continued to chant, the world around me seemed to twist and warp, as if I had been transported to another realm. The forest dissolved into a nightmarish landscape, and I felt as if I were standing on the precipice of a nightmare. I turned and ran, my heart pounding, the chant and the grotesque figure fading into the distance. I returned to our campsite, shaken and bewildered, but the chanting and the vision of the creature continued to haunt me. The next morning, I shared my experience with my family, but they dismissed it as a bad dream. We packed up our camp and left the forest, the memory of that night forever etched in my mind. The camping trip had taken a terrifying turn, an encounter with something beyond our understanding, and a night that would forever remain shrouded in mystery. The forest had revealed a vision of a skinwalker, a creature of the supernatural, and the tranquility we had sought had been replaced by a terror that would forever linger in our memories. Thanks for watching. Don't miss out on more spine-chilling tales. Subscribe now for weekly scares. Hit that red button and join our journey into the unknown.